Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. You should all be familiar with it. The Lord's Prayer. Starting at verse 6. Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. But thou, when thou prayest, Jesus speaking to his disciples, enters your closet, and when you have shut your door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not therefore like unto them, for your Father knows what things you have need of before you ask them. So why are you asking? It's about communication. He knows, and you know, but if you want something, you have to ask for it, don't you? No matter how well you know someone, if you want something, you have to ask them for it. Some people like to assume, but that's just going to get you into trouble. Nobody is exalted enough to think, well, there's lots of people exalted enough to think that they shouldn't have to ask, but the fact is, when you need something, you need to ask for it. Be not therefore like unto them. I'll go back to verse 7. For when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knows what things you have need of before you ask him. Verse 9. After this manner, therefore pray ye. Now he's not saying you have to pray this exact prayer. He's saying like this. Why like this? He just finished talking about vain repetitions. So he's saying, well, for example, it's like he's saying, for example, you can pray like this. But this has to be after this manner. Therefore pray ye. Our Father which art in heaven. This is interesting. Of course, we acknowledge our Father. He's the Father of us all. He's created us all. Now, people get tied up about gender, Father, because he's the head. But he just as easily relates also to the female side. He said, Jesus said himself, I would have, as the hen gathers the chicks on their wings, I would have gathered you, but you wouldn't have anything to do with it. He also says in the Old Testament, he said, I love you more than a mother loves her child. So it's not tied up about the fact that it's not a gender issue, but he says, our Father, the Father of us all, who art in heaven. Now this gets a little more interesting. Isn't God everywhere? Yes, he's everywhere. So why are we acknowledging him in heaven? Because that's where he dwells. That's where the fullness of God is. He's surrounded by his angels, by the saints, praising and worshiping him. He dwells in the fullness of perfection. He's here, but where he dwells is in heaven. Now that's really important, and we have to acknowledge him there. Why? Because that's where we have to meet him. You can't meet him in the flesh. Not anymore. You can't meet him in this world. You have to meet him in the Spirit, and in the Spirit, it's heaven. It's the fullness of peace and joy of God. There's no attack of the enemy. It's just the secret place of the Most High. In the fullness of his presence. So that's why it's in heaven. Of course we meet him in heaven. When we're in the depth of our problems on this earth, where do we meet him? We get into the Spirit and we meet him in heaven. And he changes us. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your name is hallowed. It's revered, it's respected, it's loved, it's holy, it's pure, it's true. He said, this is where it gets really radical. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Think about it. His kingdom is manifest in heaven. And his will is manifest in heaven. He says, and it happens. Now it hasn't quite manifest here on earth. Why? Because there's still authorities that are delegated in this earth, which he hasn't taken back yet. All things are not in submission to God. So we have to pray that his kingdom comes to earth like it is in heaven. But the next one is even more radical. Your will be done in earth. Why is that radical? Well, first of all, Am I in line with his will? Do I even know what his will is? If I'm praying that his kingdom come and his will be done, I have to be in alignment with that. So I have to be part of his kingdom. I have to be flowing in his kingdom, not working against it. And I have to certainly know what his will is and be in line with it. Now the question is, do I know? First question is, do I know what his will is? Because if I don't know what his will is, I can't pray that prayer. If I don't know his will, I can't be in line with his will. If I'm not in alignment with his will, I'm working against him. So my prayer is hypocrisy. I'm asking for his will to be done on earth, and yet I'm working against him. And how do I work against him? When it's all about me. Well, I want, and I want, and I want, and I want. Most people, when they get into I want, they're not talking about, well, God, if you will, I want. Or it's like, God, I'm asking you for it. It's like, no, I want. And we all know people like that. If we're not that ourselves. Okay? So I will get to some extent to that point. But it's like, but the prayer is, thy kingdom come on earth, thy will be done on earth. So it's really important for us to identify what God's will is for my life and for what he wants me to do during the course of the day, the way he wants me to act during the course of the day. See, I can even do the right thing, but with the wrong attitude, I'm still working against God. Because it's not going to come, the life of God isn't going to come through my life. It's going to be, it's like, I don't know what that guy's problem is. Thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth. Am I really part of the kingdom? Am I working to further the kingdom? Or am I working to further me? Do I know the will of God for my life in terms of the small details as well as the big details? It doesn't matter what I feel like doing. God, what do you want me to do? And if you want me to do it, I need your strength and your grace to do it. Because I don't know how to do it, or I can't do it sufficiently, or I don't have the ability, I don't have the strength, I need the help of God. So I need to know what it is, and then I need God's help to do it. Really important. And that means I got to start with finding out what he wants. So when I get up in the morning, do I ask him what he wants from me? Because I just prayed, right? Thy kingdom come and your will be done. How's God's will manifest in the earth? Through the believers. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Through the believers. That's where God's will is manifest in the earth. Not just what they do, but the way in which they do it. What did Jesus say? If I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. Can I go through life being gracious and doing the things that God does without trying to draw attention to me? Look at how good I was. Look at how good I did that. Because if I can, then God will be lifted up, and then I'll get a blessing. Not because I did it, but because I was obedient to God. Because God was lifted up, because he was exalted. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. It's radical. Am I with the program? That's not just, checking in once a week. That's every moment of every day. Am I working to further his kingdom through the way that I interact with God and am obedient to him? If I'm just sometimes obedient, it's clearly not with the program. In the military, they expect people to listen 100% of the time. Not 95, not if they're feeling good, but 100% of the time. They're uncompromising. Yet, we belong to God, and we think that, well, it's kind of optional. Well, if I feel like it, I can get with the program. If I'm not too tired, I might be able to pray. If my budget isn't too tight, well, I might be able to tithe. It's like, but that's not the program. I'm either with God's program, his kingdom, and his will, or I'm not. Sometimes is not full time. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Why does he say that? Because clearly, I can't take care of myself. I can't keep myself healthy. I may think sometimes, well, I can take care of myself. I can't. Why? Because I can lose my job like that. I could lose a job, or I can lose my health to lose my job. I mean, there's lots of things that can happen. I have a job. I have what I have by the grace of God. And even the things that I have, I can lose like that. So it's not about what I have. It's not about what I'm getting. The security I have is in Jesus Christ. Everything else, it comes and it goes. So I have to ask him for what my needs are today. Now, it's not just food in my stomach, clothes on my back, roof over my head, transportation. Not just those things. Like it says in Psalm 23, he restores my soul. He's interested in taking care of me, giving me peace and joy, taking care of my vexations, taking care of my fears. How do I do that? By talking to him. Got to tell him what my problems are. He knows them. But unless I let go by talking to him, he can't help me with them. Give us this day our daily bread, the things we need to sustain us. It's not just food, it's just not just money, it's a complete package. It's like he knows what I'm going to need today, and I don't even know what I need today. I don't know what I'm going to need an hour from now or 5. I'm just like, I can think I know, and sometimes I'm fairly accurate, but for the most part, I don't know. God knows what's coming an hour or 5 hours from now. I don't. So I got to ask him to take care of the needs that I haven't even identified yet. My daily bread, taking care of what I need today. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Oh, that's a tough one. Everybody likes to hang on to revenge. Everybody likes to hang on to unforgiveness. But everybody wants it. That's the thing about it. Everybody likes to harbor a grudge, but everybody wants to be forgiven. Oh, that was nothing. That was nothing. What are you vexing? That was nothing. It was like until it happens to you, and it's like it's a big thing. and God is really good about it. He says, I like how he puts it. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. We're asking God to forgive us the same measure we give to other people. There's a principle there. That's why I said it. It's like, I want you to ask me. You don't have to ask for grace. You just ask for God to forgive you as much as you forgive others. And you know what? God's forgiven us much, much more than we've forgiven others.
Amen.
He knows all the dirtiest part of you. Your dirtiest, nastiest thoughts. And still he forgives you. He's saying, just ask me to forgive. Ask me to forgive you as much as you forgive others. How much forgiveness does he want from us? Everything. Like he said, 70 times 7. Yeah, give till it hurts. Like I said, when you read it, it's like, and you start thinking about it, this is a radical prayer. He said, ask me to forgive you as much as you forgive others. And if you can't forgive others, well, then I guess you need to do some work. And what do? You go back to God and you tell him how you can't forgive others, but you need his help, his grace to forgive them, so that you yourself can be forgiven. Lead us not into temptation. I like this one. I preached on this before. But deliver us from evil. Now God, James talks about the fact God will not tempt you with evil. He doesn't. Jesus himself was tempted. With him it was just about necessities, but he recognized his necessities are met by God, not by the enemy. So lead us not into temptation. How does that happen? How do we get led into temptation? There are times when we will insist on something. It's not good for us. And sometimes God will say, okay, you insist, you can have it. Now let's see how you're going to handle it. Mm-hmm. Be careful what you ask for, is the saying. And I think specifically in Numbers, said, we're tired of this manna. We want meat. So God said, okay, I'll give you meat. I'll give you lots of meat. Up to 2 meters high off the ground, like 6 feet off the ground. I'll give you lots of meat. And he said, even while they were eating it, the plague hit them, killed them off. So what was the problem? The problem wasn't the plague. The problem wasn't the meat. The problem was their attitude. They didn't deal with the attitude, so God gave them what they asked for, and it cost them. And when we are absolutely determined, hell-bent, so to speak, to get what we want, God will let us have it. Sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes. And why is that? Well, it's like some people will just push until they get what they want. And it's like God will give it to them. He gives it to them in the same way that, the enemy came and told God, he said, if you take everything away from Job, he'll curse you. God said, no, he won't. So he said, yes, he will. He said, well, let's see. And he took everything away and he didn't curse him. And then when the enemy came back, God said, now I want you to look at my servant Job. He said, even though you provoked me to take everything away from him, still he's not cursing me. He got up in the enemy's face about it. So, I make that point to say that, yes, though the enemy does the dirty work, he's still got to get permission from God. So God has no problem taking responsibility even for the nasty things that happen in our lives. And there are times, even when we ask for things we shouldn't have, and we get them, he still takes responsibility for it. Yeah, I gave it to him. Essentially, he allowed us to lead ourselves into temptation. But it's like he's still a leader, so he's saying, okay, I'll take responsibility for it. And that's because we push. And that's because we insist on getting what we want. God does not tempt us. God's not saying, did you consider this? When the enemy does that, God doesn't. God keeps us in paths of righteousness. God keeps us in a place, when we're in the anointing, you can't even think of evil. You can't think to do evil. Because your mind isn't on that page. In the same way, God can't do evil. But when we insist on having it our own way, sometimes he'll say, okay, you won't be happy with this, but the only way you're going to learn is that to get a taste of what you don't like. And there's people right here. I think probably all of you have had a taste of that at one time or another. You got something that you knew that you shouldn't have, and you paid for it. It's called an education. The school of hard knocks. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. This is interesting. Deliver us from evil. That's from things you don't even see. People scheming against you and God foils their scheme. People talking against you and it's like it doesn't come to anything. People want to do nasty things. They can't. The enemy plots to get you in an accident or something and God delays you and you'll get angry but still you miss an accident. It's like things like that happen. It's like, and we don't realize God delivering us from evil. He says, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. So be it. It says, for his is the kingdom. There is no other kingdom. Kingdom of righteousness. Everything else falls apart in the end. All the power belongs to him. All the glory belongs to him. Forever. So be it. And that's our message today.
Amen.